it turns out that John McCain has gotten pulverized in the polls in New Hampshire.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Well, this is a big development.
Not just New Hampshire.
No, not just New Hampshire. This is not a small development. I think this is a big development. I think John McCain, and I said this before on the show, was a prohibitive favorite in the Republican field. And to the point where I was saying, with his financial advantage, the institutional advantage, the fact that he had the whole Republican establishment behind him, it was a runaway train. But that was before he took this disastrous Iraq war on his shoulders. And he was like, no, I love the Iraq war. The Iraq war rocks, and I want to escalate it and put in more troops than even George Bush does. And look at what his polls numbers have plummeted to in New Hampshire.
A year ago in New Hampshire, he got 49% of independent voters.
Oh,
and now it's down to 29% among independent voters. So this is a guy who had the crossover appeal to Democrats, who had wild popularity, and I think to some extent justified for a long time among independent voters. And now it's like he chose Iraq to be his issue, partly to appeal to the right. I mean, he's going around and he's visiting with Pat Robertson, and he's going to slam, he's going to turn his back on his fight against gay marriage. I fight to prevent the fight against gay marriage, if I can say that in confusing fashion. I suspect he hasn't actually done that yet. But, I mean, he is appealing to the right. He's gone and visited. Did he go to Bob Jones?
He said he would speak to
He said he would speak to Bob Jones, but he certainly had the meeting with Pat Robertson. But conservatives, as we heard last week from none other than James Dobson, from the head of Focus on the Family there in Colorado Springs, which borders Nebraska. James Dobson said, "I will not support McCain under any." You have the quote right there?
I have two quotes from Dobson. He said, speaking as a private individual, he has to do that for tax reasons. I would not vote for John McCain under any circumstances.
Hillary Clinton, John McCain, the guy saying I wouldn't vote for him under any circumstances.
He continues, he's not in favor of traditional marriage, and I pray that we will not get stuck with him. Okay, that's what James Dobson said about John McCain. So no matter how many times he went crawling on his knees to be a team player with James Dobson, Dobson still bitch slaps him and says, no, I don't believe you. You don't hate gays enough.
If John McCain's decision with his presidential ambition had not been to fully embrace the Bush administration, but to say to John Kerry, I cannot run with you. I don't agree with you on enough. But I will not campaign for George Bush either. We'll let this shake out. And then he had essentially done what Lieberman said. I'm an independent Republican. These guys are crazy on Iraq. They don't know they don't know anything about national security. And I am a real independent, critical of the Bush administration, but strong on defense. And he were running essentially as an independent. Democrats would be terrified of John McCain right now, completely terrified of him. But instead, he tried to go to the right, and the right isn't buying it, and the independents hate him now.
I think that history will say ultimately that John McCain was a pretty lousy politician. No matter where you think of him as a senator, that as a politician he went left when he should have gone right, he went right when he should have gone left, and that he never really quite got a sense of where his party or the country was going. Of course, the last 6 years is damning evidence of that. And, here he misjudged the mood of his party in 2000, where he thought he could run to the center and win the nomination. I thought that was a heroic effort. I thought it was a good effort. And then he all of a sudden flip-flopped and ruined his whole reputation by then thinking, oh, okay, well, since that didn't work, I have to change who I am, everything I've ever stood for, and run to the right, thereby again misjudging the mood of the country and, putting himself far to the right and losing all the independent voters. And my sense is that he's not going to win the Republican primary at this point if he keeps going this way.
By the way, this polling was done by American Research Group. It's New Hampshire-based, and they are finding very similar numbers in Iowa and Nevada for McCain.
People have caught on. We've been talking about it, and I think it's gotten a decent amount of coverage lately about how he sold out to the right, and it's now apparently resonating. And a lot of those independent voters are now going to Barack Obama. They're going, even if the ones that were leaning Republican are now going to the Democratic side. Yeah. So I just want to say this about McCain, right?
Yeah.
He's useless, because, no matter how you look at it. Okay, first of all, if you think Ben was saying earlier, oh, he did this about the Iraq War. He could have done that instead. So he might come out and say, look, no, I've always thought the Iraq War was a good idea. I always loved the Iraq War. I always wanted to escalate it even further. Great. Okay, then you're useless. No one agrees with you, and you're dead wrong. So move along, right? Or he does it because he doesn't believe it at all, and he's making an incredibly crass political calculation,
Craven,
Craven, and playing with the lives of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people for his own political calculations, then F him. I mean, nobody's interested in that kind of a loser, unacceptable, unbearable politician. The formerly proud McCain, and any, I think, person that has any degree of pride, and I don't think pride in this case is a bad thing, would say, all right, well, Dobson, you wouldn't vote for me under any circumstances, then why don't you kiss the back of my ass, right? But instead, he says, I hope to continue to work with James Dobson and continue to talk to him and try to change his mind. And he says, well, the other agents of intolerance, I've already made good deals with Jerry Falwell, Rick Warren, Dr. Richard Land. Okay.
Of Southern Baptists.
Right. So, these are the guys that he called the agents of intolerance in 2000.
Correctly.
Right. Now he's saying, I'm so proud, look at Falwell, let me see how much I love. Well, if McCain wasn't such a lapdog for the right and didn't make these craven political calculations, and his only problem was that he's like, look, I thought Iraq was going to work, and I still think if we put overwhelming force in 100,000, whatever it is, we start a draft, we have real sacrifice in this country, and we go and fix Iraq, that's what I'm in favor of. I'd listen to him. I might not vote for him because I think he's wrong on the policy.
But it would certainly be it
would be principled, and it would be something that I respect. And that is not what's happening at all. It's not just Iraq. It's the going to the right and sucking up to the agents of intolerance is 1,000 times worse in my book.